a nerd, and here we are at the, gosh, Patty, the June 2015 Coffee Pot webinar series, where today we're talking about getting data out of Tabs, AP, GL Trust, even PracticeMaster, and using it to do things outside of the program, most notably to report, to create reports that can't be created within the software. Today we're going to cover that topic and talk about what you need to do it and talk about some of the things we're able to help you do. But first, a little bit of housekeeping for you. This is our GoToWebinar control panel. If you're looking at this GoToWebinar control panel right now, it's because you haven't pressed this button here that looks like an arrow pointing to the right. Because had you pressed that, this control panel would have flown right off the right-hand side of your screen, and all you would have left would be these buttons here. This button at that point would turn into an arrow pointing to the left, because clicking it again would bring this huge GoToWebinar control panel back into your screen. And why would you want to do that? So that you can type a question right here, and remember to hit send, and then Patty, our humble and substitute moderator, will recognize that you have a question, and she will interrupt me at just the right time and ask your question on your behalf. Those of you who are wondering where Leanne is, she is taking her daughter to Johanna to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to the University of Pittsburgh, to do orientation, where she will attend school in the fall. She, like my son, has graduated from high school just this past weekend, and now Leanne and I at least are without children. Patty isn't without children. Patty, our humble and substitute moderator, in fact, she's going to go home and get 3 more this afternoon. Patty has got 1 kid of her own. She's got 4 kids that she's adopted a long time ago, and now she's going to get 3 foster kids to take care of. So she's very happy to have 8 kids at her dinner table, and me and Leanne are happy to be getting rid of them and going on to this more quiet part of our life. Patty will always, me, Leanne, Mary Jo, if we ever need excitement, we just go over to Patty's house. So Patty is our moderator, and she will forward your questions to me. If you're not feeling too shy, you can also press this button here. This is, it looks kind of like a hand with an arrow pointing upward in front of it. That means raise your hand. And doing so will alert Patty that you have a question. She will do the same thing. She'll wait till just the right time. She'll interrupt me, and then she'll unmute your microphone so you can ask your own question. Now, I sometimes get off on a different tangent, as you can tell already. And sometimes I don't understand the question that's being asked. And sometimes you just have follow-up questions. Now, if you've asked your question live and your microphone is unmuted, it will remain unmuted until I'm done answering your question. So if you have anything to say, to follow up with, to ask again, to keep me right on the right track, just interrupt me, and we'll have an ongoing conversation until I get your question answered. If you're asking your question here by typing, just type your follow-up questions and remember to hit send, and Patty will keep forwarding them to me. So now, without any further ado, I'm going to press the magic buttons, all of them, and I'm going to get out of here and go over to, gosh, Tabs. And we're going to talk about reports, which is the most common thing that we do with data that we have gotten out of Tabs or AP or GL or Trust or PracticeMaster. And as you know, there are just loads and loads of reports in Tabs. Here are all the management reports. Here are all the client reports. Here are all the AR reports, all sorts of reports, and each one can be printed in literally dozens of different configurations. And yet, sometimes that's not exactly what you want. Sometimes the information may need to be tweaked and twisted around just a little so that it has the right twist for you. I mean, you only want to show people in a certain report that have been client-related matters for more than 5 years. Maybe you want to do your receipt allocation by how old the matter is. If it's over 5 years, then it goes to a certain person. If it's under 5 years, it goes to the originating attorney. Maybe you want to do receipt allocation in a way that totally is not accessible within Tabs. It just can't be done within the rules that you can create for allocating receipts. Maybe you have 8 different things or 4 different things or 3 different things that you want to see on a given report. Your attorneys want these 3 key numbers next to every matter in the report, and you have to get those 3 numbers from 3 different reports, and if you're going to pull them all together, you have to do it by hand. Well, using the tools that I'm going to show you, we or you can pull this data together or can do these special things with the data in such a way that it's going to look exactly the way you need it to look. Now, it's important to tell you that anything that's in the software can be reported on. So if the data holds the information that you need to report on, even though it's not coming out in the report exactly the way you want to see it, then we can pull it out and do exactly what you want to do with it. As long as the data's in there, that's a very important factor. Now, keep in mind, some things can be added to PracticeMaster. We can add things to PracticeMaster if you need to tag a case as a special circumstance, or you want to keep track of metrics. We'll talk about that too. So you need to classify cases as severe, catastrophic, or minor. And then you need to report on accounts receivable or report on fees billed or fees collected based on the type of case, what type of level of severity it was. We can do that because we can build data into PracticeMaster that doesn't exist. We cannot, however, build data into tabs or reorganize the way the data is stored. So it's important to note that if the data is stored and in the system in a way that we can get at it, then we can do whatever we need to. But if it's not stored exactly the right way, we don't have this level of detail, or we don't know exactly how this links to that, then we can't do it. So the data has to be in there, but if it is, then we can do anything we want with it. Literally anything with any of the data. And to show you that, I'm going to go into Help, and I'm going to go into the index and type ODBC, and I'm going to get to a data file list. And what you'll see is that absolutely every file that's in the system is accessible, and every field. So as I say, if the data is in there, then I can get to it, or we can get to it, and we can do what needs to be done with it. If you're looking for a third field that's not in here that represents hours, we've currently got hours worked and hours to bill. If you need a third field to represent hours, we can't add that field. But if you want to do some different type of comparison between hours worked and hours to bill, as long as the data's in there, we can do anything with it outside the scope of PracticeMaster. Now, how do we do, or outside the scope of tabs? Now, how do we do that? We do that with this thing called ODBC, and that's just a nerd term for Open Database Connectivity, which is just a nerd term for we're exposing the data in the programs to other programs to act on. ODBC compliant programs like Excel and Access and Crystal Reports can, if we have the ODBC drivers, I'll talk about that in a second, can reach into tabs and grab the ledger information or the fee information or the archive information from all the matters, because the ODBC driver has given us the ability to make that reach in and grab that data. It exposes that data to programs. So for instance, if we go into Excel, and if we go into Excel, there we go, and we make a data connection to using something called the Microsoft Query Wizard to ACS, oops, and we go to the client file, and let's say we want the client ID, and I'm not going to pull up names because this is my real system. City, state, zip, bam, 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 tell it where we want it, and it goes out, and it pulls out all the client IDs, their city, their state, and their zip, and puts them in rows. It's that simple. Now, the hard part is knowing how to hook it together and knowing how to get the information you want. This is just a list of clients. But I could have ordered it a certain way. I could have sorted it by city. I could have simply pulled out those that were in Michigan and ordered it by city or ordered it by zip code. It's all in the way we write the SQL statement, or the way that we, as I kind of went very quickly through, the way we structure those screens that I clicked through that tell it how to sort it and how to pull it out and how to restrict it and how to filter it. So really that's what it does. The ODBC drivers simply give an ODBC compliant program like Excel access to these tables, to these data files. And I looked at the client file. Now, The ODBC drivers have to be purchased separately. They are $99 plus shipping from STI. And if you have Platinum SQL, which is the highest level of Platinum that you can get, then the ODBC drivers come with them. So you either have to buy them, they're very inexpensive, or if you have Platinum SQL, you already got them. They have to be installed on each machine, and then whatever report you're running has to be installed on each machine, but then it can access the data on the network. It sounds simple. It's a little hard to configure, but we've gotten to be pretty good at it. And so we can get to this data and do just about anything we want. And as I said, we can get to any of the data that's in the system. Now, we've come up with some tools to help us do that. So I'm going to open something we call the ACS Data Viewer, and I'm going to explain one of our canned reports that I'm going to show you. We had a client that said, we want to see for any time period, in this example I'm going to do April, all the hours that were logged for all the attorneys, kind of totaled for each timekeeper. And then next to it, we want to see how many of those hours have been billed so far. They had a problem with attorneys that were logging the time, but they weren't approving the bills to go out, and so they were kind of delaying on billing their clients even though they were keeping track of the time. So here's how it works. I'm going to run this report just by double-clicking on it. It's going to stop and ask me what time period, what's your start date. So I'm going to point to the calendar, and I'm going to go back to April and choose April 1st. And now it's asking for the end date, and I'm going to go back to April and choose, I believe it's the 30th is the last day of the month. And bam, there is all the information. This is our programmers, Corny and Steve. We call them CL for contract labor. This is Leanne. This is Mary Jo. This is Paul. Leanne and me have a few hours that have been logged that haven't been billed yet. So Leanne's logged 40.9 hours, but only 36.5 of that has gone out. That's probably tied to programmer time. I'll explain that in a minute. Mary Jo's really good at getting her time billed. 174.58 logged, and of that, 173.60 has been billed. I am kind of the same way as Leanne. I have 5 hours that have not been billed. Now, this is a summary, and I can click this and expand and see actually all the detail. This is actually a report that's based on the fee file and the archive file kind of tied together. And so it pulls these archived and WIP fees together into this report, and this is the detail. And I have told this report that I want to summarize, so therefore I'm getting this level of summary, but I'm still able to expand and see all of Leanne's hours or see all of the contract labor hours. Now for us, it's kind of a given the contract labor hours would be high and only part of them would be billed, because when we do a custom reporting job, we log all the time, but we don't really bill for the report until it's done. So some of these reports that were started in April, we're just finishing up now in the beginning of June. And as we get done with them and get them tested and get them installed, that's when we'll bill. So that makes perfect sense. And this time for Leanne and Paul that's missing is probably tied to these custom reporting projects that we've logged the time but we haven't billed. In a law firm, depending on the law firm, that would be more of a problem because most of them want to get those bills out on a monthly basis and have that time always billed. Now, let me explain some of the things we can do here. I'm going to go back to where it's not grouped, where it's just raw data. I can sort by anything I want. Now, it doesn't make sense to sort by hours, but here I'm sorting by date. Here I'm sorting by client ID. Here I'm sorting by timekeeper. And I can take these things and drag them up. Let's say I wanted to see how this time broke down by date. I can drag that column up here and let go. And now I've got all the dates, and underneath each date, I've got the exact hours that were logged that day. I can even build a second level of timekeeper. So now it's sorted by date, and when I expand it, I see all the timekeepers, and when I expand that, I see their hours for that given day. This is called leveling or grouping, and I can break those groups one at a time or all at once. I can also filter. If I wanted to see only client 19309, I can say contains 19309, and now I'm looking at just that. When I get rid of that, I'm back to looking at the whole thing. I can filter based on does not contain, does contain, starts with, ends with, all sorts of different things. So these things are all built into our ACS data viewer, And by encapsulating this logic to build these grids and allow people to group things and sort things and filter things into something called the ACS Data Viewer that we write once and then distribute with everything that we put out there, that brings your cost down. So our reports that can be done in the ACS Data Viewer are cheaper because we know that 99% of the reports are people wanting to pull a set of information into a grid where they can sort it and play with it and group it and then put it out somewhere, usually to Excel. So we built the export to Excel into the Data Viewer. And the thing is, once you have the Data Viewer, you have it, and we can write other reports even more cheaply than the first one was produced. So the Data Viewer is one of our tools that we use to make it a less expensive experience for somebody to get custom data into a report out of Tabs or PracticeMaster or AP, GL, or Trust. And another tool that we have is our Excel add-in. So I'm going to close up this quick spreadsheet that I did to show how ODBC works, and I'm going to open up Excel again, and this time in a blank cell I'm going to type equals ACS. And what you're looking at here are all the ACS functions that we have built into Excel once we add in that functionality. And so we've actually taken functions, built them into Excel so that we can write reports directly in Excel if that's appropriate, and you can even write reports directly in Excel. To demonstrate, I'm going to use this AR amount one, and I'm going to go up here to the wizard, if you will, and it needs two things. It needs to know the connection string, it's called, and I'm going to make that and I'm sorry, it's actually called STI SQL. And the client ID, let's do 12441. It loads the data, and this client has AR, because it's the AR amount function that I used. This client has AR of 145. Now, you don't type these functions in every time you run the report. What you do is you write a report that pulls the right data and then uses these functions to get things like AR amount, total WIP fees, total archive fees. And so you end up with a report that you simply load, you pull the report into Excel, hit the refresh button, and it updates everything from the data instantly. Let me show you that one more time. I'm going to go out and get this same client's archive fees. How much have we billed them in fees so far? And so I'm going to go equals ACS, and I'm going to find the archive fees function, and I'm going to use the wizard to help me build it. So I'm going to say DSN equals STISQL. That's just the name of the data source that we've created. DSN means data source name. And I'm going to use client ID equals, same one, let's see, 12441.00. And this one will take just a little bit longer because it's got to pull in archive data, and archive data is, and that client doesn't have any, and that's because I typed the name wrong, or number wrong, 12441. And I've corrected that. See how quickly it went out and got it again, $5,103.54. So a couple things going on here. It's loading all the data the first time, and all the other calls are extremely quick. If I say I want ACS archive fees for a different client, I can do it a couple ways. I'm going to actually get out of here. I can just simply copy this down here. Oops. Copy this down here, and then change the number. Or I can just point to a field that's got the number, 15723. Let's try that. Bam, they don't have any archive fees. Of course, I didn't put it in right. I said 15723. And they do. They have $16,000 in archive fees. So we can either type numbers directly in, which is not usually the way it happens. We usually have a number over here. We make a data call, or we have a list of numbers, and then we simply refer to that field. So instead of putting in the client number, I can also just put in something like, A1 or C2, and I'd be pointing to a certain field, certain cell, grab the client number from there. If you understand Excel, this makes perfect sense to you. If you don't and your head's kind of spinning, simply remember that this is a tool that we have. Oops. This is a tool that we have that allows us to do some things less expensively. By using the Excel add-in, by using the ACS data viewer, we are able to do our job and create some really neat, really nice looking reports for you, pulling this data from Tabs and AP and GL and Trust and PracticeMaster and doing it as inexpensively as possible. Let's look at one other report that's canned, that's available at an even less amount than the first person that did it because it's already been done. This would be our positive pay. I think I mentioned that positive pay is one of the things that we've done recently for several people. And what that means is that you tell the system a certain date range. I'm going to use 5/22 because I know there's a check in there that doesn't have any confidential information. So I'm going to pull all the checks from bank account number 3 that were written between the dates of 5/22 and 5/22, in other words, on 5/22. And what it does is it goes out and reads that information, and this is the one check that was written. It was check number 52771. That's the date, that's the amount, that's the bank account number, and that's the account name. I can then create a CSV file, and I'll show you what the CSV file looks like. I've already created it, and upload it to the bank. And a lot of banks are doing this now. They're offering incentives, or they're trying to get you to use this to provide a more secure means of paying people by check, whereby you write your checks and give them to the people, but then you've also already told the bank to expect this check, and the bank will only pay the checks that you have told it to pay. That's why they call it positive pay. You have positively identified the checks that you're going to pay, and the bank will only pay those checks. So if we go and look at this real quickly, I got to remember where this is. It's in the demo system data viewer folder. There we go. Positive Pay CSV. You end up with something. Oh, I don't want to show it to you in Excel. I'm sorry. Excel messes with these things. You end up with something that looks like this. This is a CSV file. It's simply a raw data file that you would then upload to your bank. And of course, you would have, if you were going to do this, you would have more checks that you wrote in a given period. And so you could simply produce this very quickly with all the 24 checks that you wrote that day, upload it to your bank, and bam, you've told them what you're going to pay. Another example of some of the canned reports that we have would be the metrics reports that we see a lot of people doing. Metrics is merely keeping track of things about a case, level of severity, how it was resolved, it went to trial, it was mediated, whether we won or lost. A lot of the defense firms, the insurance defense and the corporate defense firms, are starting to keep track of these metrics so that they, A, can measure how successful they are at different types of cases, and B, tell their clients how successful they are so that they can say, last year we handled 16 severe cases for you, and they all settled within 8 months, or they all settled within this dollar volume, or they were this close to what we estimated they would settle for, or we had 8 that were mediated positively on our side. And so we have a lot of clients that are starting to do this, and it's a matter simply of going to PracticeMaster and creating fields where we can keep track of the things that we want to keep track of, and then writing reports around them. So this is an example of a screen, a metrics screen from one of my clients that is doing metrics, and they're keeping track of their case types, the severities, the resolution type, and I dropped that box down when I took this picture, whether it was mediated, whether it was a special circumstance, that's what ORS stands for. Some of them they don't want to include in metrics. How much was the case settled for that was paid by insurance versus how much the total settlement was, including the out-of-pocket from the client. And then they're running reports based on all the cases closed in a certain time period to see which timekeepers have cases that they are primarily responsible for that are favorable, and which clients have favorable outcomes. And then they're going back to the clients and saying, look what we've done for you, give us more work. So very, very leading edge. Another one that I'll just talk to about is AP Pay. We have some plaintiffs firms that say, okay, we write a lot of checks to people for our cases that we're handling, that we don't really cut those checks and give them to the client. We don't really pay them or give them to the expert witness or the medical records requesting company or the whatever company we've contracted with to provide certain services. We have arrangements with them that they will get paid when we settle, or they will get paid when we get paid by the client for out-of-pocket expenses. So this allows that client to, this theory is that the client can write the check and immediately post it to the client's account. And then this report comes along and looks for checks that have not been produced yet for costs in tabs that have been paid for. So that every month the bookkeeping person in the firms that use this report, they run the report and it says, okay, these costs that are waiting to be paid to this expert, for instance, have now been paid by the client. So now you can cut those checks to the expert. Before, they had to, every time a check came in or every time a settlement was made, they had to look and see if they should pay that person, because that was the only way they had to keep track of it. So that's another one that we have canned that a lot of our plaintiffs firms are starting to look at, because most of them have arrangements with their experts and certain other providers that they will get paid for their services when the case settles or when the client reimburses for the out-of-pocket expenses. We have, therefore, the data viewer. We have the Excel add-in. These are ways that we have of providing tools that can pull this data out and do neat things very quickly, therefore very inexpensively. But sometimes we have clients that have reports that are very complicated, and we still have the ability to do anything we want. It's just that those reports, if they aren't able to take advantage of the Excel add-in or the data viewer, they cost a little more because we have to write all the code from hand. We still have, at this point, 2 developers, Steve and Corney, that spend all their days doing these things, but it takes longer for them to do it if they have to write all the code by hand. So we have the ability to do anything as long as you have the ODBC drivers and the data is in the system. That does it. If you have questions that I haven't answered and you think of them later, just give me a call at the number that's on your screen, or email me at paul.purdue, like the school, not the chicken, paul.purdue, P-U-R-D-U-E, at attorneycomputersystems.com. Let's go to Attorney Computer Systems real quick. Go to the main site. I just want to show you how you can get to other video-related information from us. If you go to attorneycomputersystems.com, I emphasize the S at the end of systems, and click on videos, you'll see all of our video titles. We have virtual user group meetings for all 3 programs that we work heavily with: WorldDocs, PracticeMaster, and Tabs. We have our coffee pot webinars. That's what you're watching or attending right now. We have our eBite video series. That's Mary Jo's little series of short 4 or 5 minute videos on very succinct topics, really cool things that we find that can be summarized in 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. And then we have the longer talk show type format show, the Paul and Mary Jo show, where Mary Jo or I will expand and go into great detail on a specific topic. So if you go to these, you will find registration information and links to register for the next one, which are our next one for the Coffee Pot webinar series is WorldDocs GX4, the new version of WorldDocs. And as you scroll down, you'll see the other ones. Here's the one we're looking at right now, and it's currently in post-production. Actually, we haven't gotten done with it. We're about finished. So as soon as we get done, it'll be turned over to Brad, our video producer. And when he's done, it'll show up on the website, just like this one does here. So you can see any of the recorded versions of any of the webinars or virtual user group meetings or the eBites or Paul and Mary Jo Show video series simply by going to our website, finding the appropriate thing and scrolling through. Or you can search if you want to learn about emailing statements, and you go here and type email. One of these that's going to come up is going to talk about emailing statements through tabs. So you have the search capability, you have the browse capability, and be sure to join us next month when we talk about World Docs GX4. That's it for now. Everybody have a good rest of the day, good rest of the month, and we'll see you next month. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.